The Orange County Register is under new ownership and new management, and it's all from out of town. What does it mean for this important and distinctly Orange County institution? I talked to two media insiders and also to a former owner whose bold attempt to grow the paper ended in bankruptcy. Next on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by 5 Point. 5 Point is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Memorial Care is transforming the way healthcare is delivered, keeping our communities and businesses healthy by guiding them on the path to wellness with easily accessible hospitals, physician offices, and outpatient centers. Memorial Care, leading the way.
Hi, I'm Reiff. Welcome to Inside OC. The Orange County Register is out of bankruptcy again, and this time it's part of an LA-based newspaper group that's part of a national newspaper group. What will it mean for the county's most important news source and for the Register's distinctive libertarian editorial voice? Well, I'll be talking later with two local media insiders. But first, the end of a newspaper dream. Like papers everywhere, the Orange County Register has struggled in recent years with falling readership and revenue. In November, its parent company, Freedom Communications, filed for bankruptcy for the second time in 6 years. Three entities wanted to buy the Register and its sister paper, the Riverside Press Enterprise. The winner, with a bid of about $50 million, was Digital First Media, which owns a bunch of newspapers, including the LA Daily News and the San Jose Mercury News. The losers were the LA Times, done in by an antitrust action from the federal government, and a group headed by Register executives, including one of the paper's former co-owners. He's a Boston entrepreneur who tried to do something nobody else has dared in this age of the internet: grow a newspaper by going all in on print. Joining me, past president of the Orange County Register, Eric Spitz. Eric, thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
What happened?
What happened? Well, we came here with some bold ideas. We attempted to execute them, and turns out that the industry and the media world we live in was not accepting of those ideas. We made some mistakes, and ultimately, it was not a successful financial venture.
Yeah, just so folks know, kind of what went on. You bought the paper for what, like a little over $50 million, right? Was it your investor group had about $50 million into it?
Including a pension obligation. So on top of the cash.
So you assumed a pension. How much was the pension obligation?
Over $100 million.
All right, so a lot. 150 million, pretty much skin in the game.
Yep.
And you did something at a time when everybody else is cutting costs, going onto the internet. You guys made the decision print is still very important and that we should emphasize that. You doubled the staff, right? From like 200 to 400 people, brought it back to where it had been in its heyday pretty much as far as staffing, right? And of course, everybody was rooting for you. Sure. in the business, but a lot of people were just scratching their heads saying you're trying to walk on water. How did you approach this when you came in? Well, first of all, let's talk a little bit about you and your partner, your financial partner, Aaron Kushner. But what was your background? You're an entrepreneur.
I'm an entrepreneur, sort of a classical entrepreneur. Started my first company my first year out of business school, launched 4 or 5 other companies, got into a variety of different businesses where I saw a mix between an opportunity and an industry that I enjoyed and felt was important. I've always been a change the world kind of guy, and I liked the opportunity to dip into the newspaper journalism industry, really the media industry, and try to do some things that no one had done before.
Yeah, I thought one of the things that you did, Narragansett beer, right? Folks back east might be familiar with it. Kurt Gowdy, have a Gansett,
Jaws, right?
Yeah. All right. So now here you guys come to the Register. What was it that you saw?
Frankly, the Register itself was not the prize that we originally aimed at, meaning it was the newspaper business itself. We originally got together to try to buy the Boston Globe. We worked on that for about a year, ultimately determined that we weren't going to be successful in buying the Globe, but found that we had come up with some ideas that we thought were worth pursuing, and we looked at other newspaper deals. And the fifth one that landed on our plate was the Register and Freedom Communications, which included 5 other papers in addition to the Register that we ultimately ended up selling, and then we bought the Riverside Press Enterprise. But we kind of landed here. It wasn't a carefully crafted plan to get the Orange County Register.
Yeah. So you land here. It's a long way from Boston here. What's is there anything you discovered like, holy cow, I never expected this?
All the sunshine, I think, was the biggest surprise. I remember the first day when my wife, it was probably a couple months after we moved here, and she said, if we lived in Boston, this would be a top 10 day. And I said, yeah, and we get about 300 of them here. That was probably the biggest change. And frankly, I answered that question a number of times early on in my time here and concluded that we don't live very differently from one another in this country. We shop at the same stores, we eat at the same restaurants, we see the same movies, we all stare at our phones. It's a very similar life that we lead. The individual cultures that we live in just aren't that different, and most of the differences are weather driven.
Yeah. So when you look back on this experience, do you say, gosh, if we had just done this differently, it would have worked, or isn't there anything you could have done?
Oh, I think we certainly made mistakes that are easy to second guess. I think we went out too fast. I think we hired too quickly. I think we didn't read the data properly before we went and did more things. I think we tried to do too much too quickly. And had we spread out some of the concepts, some of the ideas, we might have been more successful because we wouldn't be chasing our tail quite as much.
So is this still a model that somebody else you think could do and succeed at?
I think that some of the things that we did are being emulated today.
Such
I
as?
saw a day rate, a 99-cent day rate on getting behind the paywall, which was something that we invented. The Boston Globe is now doing a golden envelope program similar to the one that we did with the philanthropic community. There were a lot of things that I think we did, most of them around engaging the community, that I think will work. I think that the industry needs to, as an industry, decide that it will not give away its content for free. Until it does that, it's just a race to the bottom.
And do you think right now, as you look at things, is there a future for newspapers?
I believe there's a future for newspapers. I'm not sure that it is a mass advertising vehicle in the future, but I do believe that people will be getting newspapers as far as I can see into the future.
When you say not a mass advertising vehicle, what would it become? More just subscription-based, or what?
A subscription-based service, yes, and I believe that it'll just have a much smaller audience.
Do you think, tell me, as coming in, really being not familiar with the newspaper business, at first I gather you thought that was a plus. You're bringing a fresh perspective to things. What was the drawback of that?
Of not being in the industry?
Yeah.
I think that just like any other industry that you're not familiar with, the people are new to you. You can't see around corners. I talk about that a lot, meaning that if you have a lot of experience at doing something, you know what's coming next. We didn't know what was coming next. Frankly, I'm not sure that our success or lack thereof was due to our industry skill. I think it was due to other things.
So I know Aaron Kushner, your partner, and he had a greeting card business. That was kind of his claim to fame. He's back east now.
Yep.
And how about you? What are you planning to do? Are you heading back, or are you going to stick around here where it's sunny all the time?
I have 3 children, 2 of whom are in high school, and I would be a bad dad if I ripped them out of high school at this point. My goal is to stick around.
Oh, so they're in high school here. Okay, so you're going to stick around here. Have you already started? I mean, you're a serial entrepreneur. Are you looking at things? Should people expect that Eric Spitz is going to turn up in Orange County doing something else?
I should think so. Yes.
Okay, and will it be in media? Will it be in newspapers?
Unlikely.
Okay. How about media related, or are you just going to do some go back to beer or something like that?
My career has been diverse in the past. I don't expect that that it will be very closely linked to newspapers, but I've learned a lot and met a lot of people and enjoyed my experiences. So who knows?
Yeah. So how does it feel to lose all that? I mean, was it 50? You assume the pension obligation, but I mean, they took that. I mean, you forfeited that or whatever, right? So basically, you and your investors put in $50 million. It's pretty much all gone?
That's not actually accurate, meaning that a portion of that 50 million, a significant portion was debt, and the debt got paid back. So the equity did not provide a return. They all lost all their money.
Including you?
Including myself.
And so about how much was that? Just the equity
in the
part?
tens of millions of dollars.
Okay. Chalk it up. That's you win some, you lose some, or?
It's never fun, that's for sure. It's not a financial success. I will work for the rest of my career to try to pay people back, the folks that I brought into the deal. I feel strongly that that's something that I'm obliged to do, but I don't know what else to do with this one.
Yeah, it's does it hurt that the folks that have bought it now? I mean, you guys were print oriented, growing. You wanted to grow the organization. The folks that are buying it are known more for cutting costs, and their name is digital first. For goodness sake, does that bug you at all?
I don't know that it bothers me. I think it's an evolution of the industry, and it's a natural next step. Frankly, I think that had we not bought the paper 4 years ago, this would have happened 3 years ago. The company was aiming to sell to a private equity or newspaper company, and frankly, all of the successful ones are cutters, because that's what the industry, that's the mode that the industry is in. Right? It's a declining industry, and the only way to keep the profitability constant is to cut.
Yeah. So, well, Eric, you know, you're to go back to that famous Teddy Roosevelt quote. You're a man that was in the arena, and you fought the good fight. And you know, it's good to know you, and I'm very happy to hear you're still going to be sticking around.
Well, I appreciate that.
So thanks very much, and continued luck. And maybe we'll have you back on when the new thing is starting.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Eric. And I invited Ron Hassey, he's an executive with Digital First Media and the new publisher of the OC Register, to come on this show to give a statement. I haven't heard back. But Hassey did talk to one of his reporters at the Inland Valley Daily Bulletin, and in part, here's what he said. Our plan is to keep the Register and Press Enterprise mastheads local and independent. We've already identified some digital revenue opportunities at the former Freedom papers. The Register's editorial voice, he said, is in the early evaluation stages. My emphasis is to have a strong opinion organization with a voice that is different than that of the Los Angeles Times. And now joining me to discuss the future of the Orange County Register, he founded OC Metro Magazine and until recently was a Register executive. Now he's Chief Communications Officer for developer 5 Point Communities, Steve Churm. And he's the founding editor of OC Weekly, currently Vice President of Communications at the California Policy Center. He also works at watchdog.org. Will Swaim. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks for letting us come here.
Nice to see you, Rick.
So, Steve, Eric is no longer at the Register. You're no longer at the Register. What is the future for the Orange County Register?
That is indeed the big question, a question that's being asked both here in the county, I think regionally and nationally, as this story has attracted attention from coast to coast. Orange County is such an attractive market, and really the newspaper industry has been in about a 7-month meltdown here, and this is just yet another chapter. We don't know what the future of the Register is going to be. Certainly, I think you've got to give the new owners, Digital First Media, that's doing a lot of things the right way. They're saying certainly the right things in terms of the importance of local news and preserving the institution and reaching out to leaders and so forth. All good, but we're going to have to wait and see 90, 120 days. I would suggest this, that the model for the future, and of course we know Digital First now owns 11 newspapers here in Southern California. The one they don't own is the LA Times, of course. But in the Bay Area, they have
San Diego.
And San Diego, correct. Thank you. And
which the time zones. So
which the time zones. So I think
Mono
we have two
mono
players.
here.
There
Yeah.
we go. But the model we might look at is to the north of us. Digital First owns just about every major newspaper in the Bay Area, with the exception of the San Francisco Chronicle. They own the Oakland Tribune, and today, the Oakland Tribune, for the first time in its long history, goes from being a daily to a weekly as part of the East Bay Times, with a heavier emphasis on digital. Is that the model we're going to see here in Southern California? Is it possible that the Register, that we have known for 111 years as a daily deliverable product here in this county, and the Press Enterprise with 135 years in the Inland Empire, those two papers at some point in the future going to a frequency less than daily, 4 times a week, maybe weekly? That's something I'm sure Digital First is looking at as they move forward with these assets.
Yeah, Will, as Steve referenced, there's and as I read just a moment ago, Digital First is saying some promising things, if you will, if what your interest is in having the Register remain the paper that it has been over the years. But that's not their MO. That's not how they've operated. Is there any reason to think that the Register is unique and that Digital First will take a different approach to the Register?
I don't think so. I think their model certainly matches what's going on in the industry at large, and that is this consolidation effort. And what happens there is that I think the industry is becoming more homogenous. And it was doing that even when the papers were separate. There was an attempt to reach the largest possible audience. So the economics of the business require a kind of consolidation, require a kind of homogenization. And whether the Register is able to retain its voice on the editorial page, that's a small thing, I think. The question is really, what kind of coverage can you get in a community of, 3 million people, 34, 37 cities now? I can never keep track. That's the bigger question. How deep can you go in this thing, in this market?
Well, of course, I think that's the argument for a autonomous or semi-autonomous Orange County Register, is that it's 3 million people in a community that doesn't have its own television stations. Does have this show, but I mean, that's the point. It's part of the LA media market. So if people are going to get local news, if there's going to be public affairs discussions, it has to take place in the newspaper.
I think the concern is, and really to Will's point, this is where the industry is going. Over the last decade, and certainly the last 7 years, as I've referenced, just about every newspaper has been in and out of bankruptcy in this region. Cost cutting has been the model to profitability, and I don't see that changing. There were some immediate layoffs in the wake of Digital First taking ownership. What's important, and I think for a lot of leaders in this region, and you referenced the size of Orange County, its economic output, 3.1 million people, very diverse, culturally grown up, a lot of strong factors, is that we hope that what happens is in this consolidation that we don't lose the quality, the volume, and the type of news that a community needs, a community of this size, to continue to function and bind and build, whether it's in print or it's online. I mean, you're just going to have fewer people covering this county. Is that a danger? Is that somehow a negative? And time will tell, but that's a concern.
Yeah, well, I guess whether it's needed is whether anybody is going to read it. So if, maybe you and I think it's needed. So the question is it needed, and is the online world taking care of it? We don't really need the print product anymore.
Well, I think, the people sitting up here, median age, 60, maybe? I don't know. Sorry, Rick. You really threw off the curve there.
At least you're using a median, which I appreciate.
Yeah, we love paper. We are paper people, I think. But digital is going to take over. The cost of manufacturing, as we call it, printing a paper and then putting it on a truck and driving it someplace and leaving it there and then picking it up if it doesn't sell, whatever. That's just exorbitant today. The other question is whether newspapers of that sort, whether they're digital or in print, really have an audience anymore. And what I mean by that is that the newspaper used to operate this way, that you had politics for the political people and they had to come into the paper, and you were going to also give people a little bit of sports. So the sports people come in, but they didn't really want the politics. You had the social page, and people who wanted that came for that, right? I started out on the sports page as a little kid, then I read into politics, right? That's how it works for a lot of readers.
The department store approach.
The department store mentality, and it may not work anymore because we've become so vertical. So if you want sports, you go to, I don't know, ESPN or, Bleacher Report or whatever. You go to your school's podcast to hear about, in my case, USC football, for example. It's very vertical. And I don't know whether Orange County, with its 34, 37 cities, really has that kind of binding sense of, we have the Housewives of OC, we have the Offspring, and we used to have No Doubt. Now we have Gwen Stefani, maybe, who doesn't live here. We have a few things, in other words, that bind us to this place, the image of oceans over my shoulder. But I'm not sure that's enough to get people to come into a big general interest newspaper.
Well, I would argue that all the more reason that you need a newspaper that does bring it together. And of course, that's what the one-time Santa Ana Register did when it became the Orange County Register. I mean, who the heck names a place after a county, and who has a newspaper after a county? Orange County. But to illustrate two numbers that I think illustrate much of what Will just said. Keep these numbers in mind: 50 million and 2 billion. All right, 50 million is what Freedom Communications just sold for. Recall that in 2004, the then family-owned Orange County Register refinanced the company in order to pay off dissident family members who wanted out. People could cash out. At that time, that refinancing valued the company at $2 billion. So in 2004, 2 billion. Today, 50 million, which means 2.5%, if my math is right, of what it was worth or what it was valued at just now compared to just a little over a decade ago. That's pretty stunning.
Just absolutely precipitous. I mean, that decline. I mean, it's sort of mind-boggling when you talk about those numbers. I think where we're all going here, though, is, and I appreciate what Will is saying about, and I get alerts on my ESPN app all the time, so I know what the Dodgers are doing, and I certainly know, what the Golden State Warriors are doing, but I don't know necessarily what my local high school is doing. So on a granular level, and this is still, to your point, even more than many communities in this country, and I talk about Orange County as a community, 34 cities, and people look to their city, not so much a central city like Los Angeles or San Francisco or Chicago. They look to their individual cities for guidance and lifestyle and who's governing me and where's that news. You can't find that on a lot of sort of regional or national.
But I would argue.
So I think what's important is that the Register become that vehicle, whether it's in print or online or through an app, and that's the opportunity in front of Digital First, and also the challenge.
Well, let me, not just I would argue that the hyperlocal, which I think is what you're addressing, is important, but also I think there is an interest in what the county supervisors are doing, what the fire authority is doing, what the sheriff is doing. There are some commonalities. What's going on, at South Coast Plaza or in the Platinum Triangle in Anaheim.
Rick, I think you're proving my point inadvertently. I think that there is a small group of people who care about what's going on at the county board of supervisors and the OCFA, the fire authority, the sheriff's department. There is, and for those people, maybe 10,000 in number, I'm not sure what the number is, but I really do believe it's relatively small until it becomes like a dumpster fire. Then everybody cares about it. When it was Mike Corona being sheriff, or now with Tony Rakakis' snitch campaign. And where are you getting a lot of the coverage on that? From OC Weekly, I would argue. So
that's the paper you founded.
It is indeed the paper that I may have had some conflict of interest involvement with. Yes. No, but I think seriously, that too is a vertical. Right? That's another vertical, is the county politics. And what the Weekly does is not try to do hyper-local reporting. Right. It does vertical reporting. It's really kind of a political ideology. The Business Journal is business. The Metro was business and lifestyle when it was under you. I agree with you that we should care about what goes on in the county. There is a need for this. But I think it's going to be much more like what they're doing at Voice of OC. With Norberto Santana.
Which is an online news site.
Which is an online news site and is funded by, I would argue, left liberal, unions typically, or Wiley Aiken, Democratic Party guy. I think that's maybe a future where people are going to come together and see this, this news business as much more of a nonprofit requirement. A friend of mine, I think it was you, Rick, said very much like museums or galleries or performing arts centers, that a real community needs that level of commitment to its news, its information, its culture.
I would suggest, though, Will, that the numbers you're using are not entirely correct, because there's 280,000 Sunday subscribers to the Register. So that universe of 10,000 is actually larger that's interested.
I think he makes a good point, but once again, his number's too small.
Right.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
That's not the first time I've been said too small.
That's it for now. Thanks to my guests, Eric Spitz, Steve Churm, and Will Swaim. You can watch this show and past shows by going to pbssocal.org or rickreiff.com. You can also catch our shows in our post-show open mic chatter on YouTube. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by 5 Point. 5 Point is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Memorial Care is transforming the way healthcare is delivered, keeping our communities and businesses healthy by guiding them on the path to wellness with easily accessible hospitals, physician offices, and outpatient centers. Memorial Care, leading the way.